So welcome everybody to the latest episode of the Talking Balls podcast, the weekly podcast that comes out concerning all matters snooker every Wednesday. I'm your host, Michael Wright. I'm on Twitter as Writer74. And as always, introduce my co-host over there in the other window.
Hi everyone, Lee here. Welcome to another episode of the Talking Balls podcast. Welcome.
Thanks, Lee. And what we have on our show this time was we like to mix things up and get very different people involved in the sport. And we have now Matt Andrews, who I know through Matt Andrews Mentoring, as called on Facebook. But we describe him as a behavioural specialist and performance coach. So Lee, I guess you need to watch your behaviour and make sure you perform.
As always.
Welcome, Matt.
Oh, thanks very much. Yeah, good to speak to you both.
Great, thank you. And as always, thanks for spending time with us. So what does this mean then? Behavioural specialist and performance coach. Obviously, you apply it to all sorts of sports, but just tell us a bit about what the role is and what kind of things you get up to.
Yeah, it's a long story, to be honest. It goes back quite a few years now, but the behavioural specialist part was sort of more to do with my background of I worked a lot with young people to start off with within youth work, developing sort of young people, dealing with their sort of problems and sort of the issues that they would kind of have. And that sort of went on for quite a few years with working within the police for 14 years, criminal justice, working with people with addictions, which then kind of moved on to working with people that had kind of serious forms of anxiety, depression, and sort of social issues as well. So so a kind of a big mixture of, obviously during that time I kind of was qualified and become trained in a lot of different techniques that we use within that, which is, I'm not a doctor, but it's very similar to how Dr. Steve Peters works. So the chimp paradox is kind of a big part of that, and I kind of recognize a lot of the techniques that I've used over the years sort of within that. It's kind of works along the same process really. I used to work within a lot of clinical settings, sort of alongside the NHS, criminal justice, hospitals, doctors' surgeries, where we used to run clinics, things like that. Always had an interest in sport. Snooker was a big one, but also interested in, I was a little bit of a runner myself sort of years ago. So, and I was always interested in sort of the mentality of that side and the mindset that you had to kind of be in sort of to compete properly within long distance running, cross country sort of events, which I used to do a lot of. So those kind of two interests were always there. I loved working with people. I couldn't be sat behind a desk and just sat at a computer all day long. So it just wasn't me really. Always a bit of a people watcher as well. So I'd be the one sat in a coffee shop having a coffee, watching kind of people trip over and things like that and stuff. So yeah, the kind of two just kind of gradually come together, and lucky enough as well, I had a big interest in sport. It's within the family a little bit as well. There's a big interest there in certain areas. So the two kind of slowly merged together. So I ended up sort of working with a lot of players, especially in snooker, around dealing with nerves, setting and achieving goals, dealing with that sort of anxiety and kind of match management as well, really, to kind of manage those situations better, which we'll probably talk about a little bit more, but it's a lot about kind of putting little plans in place. So rather than trying to kind of wing a situation or kind of muddle through, you've actually got a plan to fall back on, to kind of give you some guidance really, and something that you can trust to sort of move you forward and get you through those sort of moments, especially when there's pressure involved as well.
And you must, Matt, sort of be rubbing your hands in the snooker world because it's such a mental game, so.
Yeah, it surprised me really, because when I was very lucky, because through family connections, I kind of invited through sort of my dad really, who was good friends with Ronnie, and Gary Feltness is actually my cousin, who's a coach and stuff, and obviously on the seniors tour now. So slowly I was kind of invited to sort of attend a few tournaments and events with Ronnie, and that the main kind of era was when Ray Reardon was about. So to kind of watch him working with Ronnie and be sat next to him while he's kind of making little notes on bits of paper and things like that, and see how his brain sort of worked was fascinating for me. But very much, even, you know, it wasn't a million years ago. It's a little bit of time now. It's gone a bit quick. But even at that time, you know, there still wasn't many players working on the mental side. Everyone knew how important it was. You look at some of the really old sort of Steve Davis books, Ray Reardon sort of books, Terry Griffiths books, they mention it. It's heavily kind of mentioned in some of how important the mental side is. But very few players were actually working on it at all, and probably didn't really understand what that meant either, really. It was a case of, well, you know, it's a bit of a difficult situation, you get on with it. So so it was, even then, it was an area where I kind of done it out of my own interest, because I got buzz and excitement, enjoyment out of helping someone improve and achieve their goals. But I was very aware that there wasn't very many, well, if at all, wasn't many people around in the sport that were actually looking at that side. I've probably been a little bit of a hidden secret for years, because of my background. Confidentiality is a very strong kind of part of my work. I feel that that's very important as well. Sometimes that can be a little bit frustrating, because it hasn't been easy to kind of promote myself and get myself out there at all. You know, I still quite often, really, to be honest, recently, I still hear people kind of go, well, who's he? You know, what does he do, and stuff. But I like that as well. There's a nice side, an exciting side of being in the background, watching people achieve sort of what they want to, and kind of knowing that we've done that together, or that I've played a part in that. Although I always put the credit fully onto the player, because that's who's out there doing it. So but yeah, times have changed a little bit, but I work in a particular way that I know that I've developed myself as well. So I'm the only person that really works along those lines. It's a very powerful way of working, because I used to use that with people with serious kind of depression, anxiety in clinical settings. So I know how effective that is. And although many of them are a little bit of a secret, sort of the results have spoken for themselves, really, because there's a really good track record there as well of helping people through qualifying, getting them through the Q school process, getting them through World Championship qualifying. You know, sort of, I know recently, I can talk about him a little bit, because he's obviously been in the papers a little bit, sort of about Ashley Hugill, who's done really well sort of this year. But that's not the first time that we've been in that situation, really, with different people. There's quite a few years now of being in similar situations and seeing people get to that point and further. So but yeah, it's obviously really good to see Ashley achieve that as well. So.
Yeah, Ashley had a fantastic run, obviously, in the first round, and that's probably the difference with, you know, someone like you, giving the positive thoughts that he needs. And as I suppose for him to know that he deserves to be there. Yeah,
definitely. That's a big part. That I had that conversation with another player yesterday, actually, who said I was in a tournament, just didn't feel that I deserved to be in that place. It's that little voice that pops up and kind of goes, you know, what are you doing sat here? Are you good enough? Can you beat this guy? Can you win this match? Can you go on to the final? You know, do you really deserve to be here, be sat in this environment with people kind of patting you on the back, saying, you know, well done for what you've achieved and things like that. So that's a big part of it that comes up a lot. So that's the sort of situation that you're kind of managing sort of fairly often, really, is that voice that pops up, that chimp, if you like, that Steve Peters talks about, that little voice that kind of questions, you know, who you are, what you can do, what you're about, and what you might go on to do. So looking too far ahead in the future is a big problem, because you know, it's especially when you're in kind of deciders and you're sort of thinking, right, you know, I've only got to pot this ball and I've won the match, I've picked up the trophy, I've won this much money, everyone's going to be congratulating me, my name's going to be in the papers tomorrow, they're going to be talking about me on telly. And then you go and miss that shot that, you know, you should be concentrating on, because your focus is elsewhere. So but that's what I love that process really, and over the years as well, there's been people that have sort of heard that I'm working with a certain player and kind of questioned it. They've said, well, you know, why are you working with him? They're not going to achieve anything. They're not going to amount to anything. And that little voice of mine in my head kind of goes, okay, well, you know, we're going to prove you wrong. So and I love that challenge, and time again, we're able to do that, you know, and see, you know, players from all different levels when they start, you know, kind of tick off those goals and achieve what they're aiming to do.
It's interesting you say that, really, Matt. You know, I mean, it sounds like a little bit, there's a bit of an imposter syndrome there that you're talking about. But also the work with Ashley, you know, we've had Ian McCulloch on, and Lee knows him reasonably well. And again, talk about a positive force of nature. You know, if Ashley's got yourself in the corner and Ian there is coaching, then he's got two people really looking forward and very positively. And we've had a lot of players say that they feel that the tour is more competitive now than it's ever been. The quality is higher. So you kind of think, well, surely then, if that's the case, then it's the minimal gains, it's the small differences, the changes that get somebody from 80, 90 in the world to maybe 20 in the world, because actually on their day, any of them can probably beat each other.
Yeah, very true. And that's, you know, when I'm talking to people, we'll kind of talk about 1 or 2%, you know, the 1 or 2% that can kind of get you across that finish line. You know, the small little changes that you can make just to make that job a little bit easier for yourself. And a lot of it is about exposure as well. You know, when you're on telly in front of cameras, you know, that's something that you've got to get used to when that's, you know, happened for the first time, when you're on that main table playing a big name player as such. As much as I can kind of help them prepare for that situation and warn them against little things to sort of watch out for, like distractions and stuff like that, exposure is really important as well. So the more times you're in that environment, as long as, I suppose, really, you have got a good team around you that's looking after how you're looking at that and how you're thinking about it. So you're not putting yourself in that position, coming away each time and thinking, well, you know, made a show of myself again, I've embarrassed myself again in front of all those viewers, the crowd, you know, what the opponent's thinking, what the commentators thinking, what my peers thinking. You know, really a big part of my job in that situation is to kind of make that more realistic and think about those things more logically, really, where, you know, kind of explaining to the players that they're actually learning, they're going through that process, they're going through that apprenticeship, learning important lessons that's going to help them, you know, in the next match and the next time they're in that situation. So exposure is really good, but it's how you kind of manage that and, you know, the conversations that go on about that as well. But yeah, I think it's a lot more. I think it's bigger percentages, you know, I think it makes a bigger difference. But even if it makes those conversations, even if you're looking at the mental side and it's making, you know, an extra 1 or 2% increase in your ability in how you play in your game, you know, that's a little bit closer to that finishing line and where you want to be.
Yeah, and I mean, you've kind of touched on it, and we don't want to ask you about specifics of how you've worked with players because there is that confidentiality anyway. But I'm presuming that, you know, obviously talking about Ashley Hugill just because it's the most recent one that we all know about, and he gave you a good shout out on, I think it was on BBC. So I presume there's been a process almost of reflecting on how he got on and the game with Neil Robertson and his whole experience of the Crucible and thinking about, you know, how he might approach getting there again at some point.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, straight away talking generally, that's the aim really. There's quite often I'm not talking about Ashley really, but other players that kind of come to mind, even when they're not perhaps feeling as confident as I would like them to be in a situation. I sit there in the background kind of knowing where they are on the pathway that I've got in my mind, if you like. So you know, they kind of might be having conversations which is obviously worrying them or things that are on their mind, but to me, I'm sat there quite confidently in the background thinking, well, okay, so we've moved from here, which was, you know, you're talking about quite serious kind of things going on, to them reducing in severity. And, you know, it's a bit more about the finer detail now, which can still be a concern to the player and a worry to the player, but I know I'm kind of managing that pathway, you know, behind the scenes where quietly confident because I know where they are and know actually how kind of strong they are. And it's about kind of building on that and building on the foundations that we've put in place. So talking about sort of Ashley a little bit, it has been a process. So I'm always confident and always kind of expect that we see some changes after first working with each other over, you know, it can literally be over a 1 hour, 2 hour conversation, as in first couple of appointments. And there's not anyone that I can kind of remember that hasn't come back to me after those, you know, that 1 or 2 hours and said, you know, I haven't noticed any different over the last week. I might put a little bit of a thing on myself now, but that's kind of what I expect as well. So, but that doesn't mean that they're obviously going to go from that point to winning the World Championships the following week. So it is a process. There is improvements pretty much instantly, even if it's just that they feel generally kind of happier about themselves, that they view the world a little bit differently. So they kind of wake up in the morning feeling a little bit more positively and things like that. Kind of getting rid of those sort of little doubts, managing that little voice a little bit better. But there is a bit of a process to there. So you're constantly looking for what's improved, you know, what are the changes, grabbing hold of those very small things at times when that's, you know, all that you've got to show that you're progressing. But they're the little steps that you're taking to that kind of bigger goal. So there's a bigger plan sort of in place. So from my side, it can be a little bit frustrating sometimes because some players, they kind of achieve something, you know, they might win an important match or an important tournament. It's just a bit of a nature of the beast, really, because I kind of try to encourage them to stay on that path, stick with what they're doing. But sometimes it can be a bit of an encouragement of, oh, I've cracked it now. I've sorted it. I've solved it. I'm feeling really good, feeling brilliant. I can do this on my own now, which the overall aim is for them to kind of manage their own problems and their own thoughts, but they might not be quite there at that point. So all of a sudden they might kind of try to do things on their own a little bit, and then you may see a little bit of a difference sort of a few sort of months later when kind of ranking points start dropping, that sort of thing, because they're not sticking to what they had in place really that was working for them. And I think with that as well, that's the same with that transition from becoming an amateur to a professional as well. Once people get onto the professional tour, there's that kind of thought or an encouragement where they feel that they have to do things completely different. They're facing a different class of opponent. They're on telly in a different situation. So there's that encouragement sort of feeling, or that voice again, as in, well, I've got to change everything because the situation's changed. When really it hasn't at all. You've just got to kind of carry on building on what's got you there in the first place and just carry on getting stronger and stronger.
And I guess some people might be a lot harder to work with others. So obviously you've got to gain their trust and vice versa. And I suppose, you know, if that person's maybe a closed book, you really need them to open up, don't you?
Yeah, there's someone that comes to mind actually when you've said that. There's other people that we've, you know, kind of got into world qualifiers, got on into the Crucible, which obviously is a big goal for every player really, is just to get there and get your foot through the door, and then, you know, to go on further as well. And yeah, there are those people that are very kind of reluctant, but I can understand that. Snooker's a bit of a funny world anyway, because there's lots of different characters around. There's lots of people who will kind of hold their hand up and say, oh, I can help you out with the mental side and things. You know, but what's their kind of background, what they qualified in, what they experienced in. But, you know, kind of players in certain situations, especially when kind of struggling for money, when the pressure's there, they're struggling to stay on tour. You talk to them and they're struggling to kind of keep their houses, keep their relationships, feed their children, things like that. Sometimes it can be a last resort where it's, well, I've tried everything else. I don't really believe in what you do or what you can do. I've played snooker for years. You know, what can you kind of tell me? So basically it's about building that trust, explaining kind of what I know, what my experience is, how I believe that I can help them. and starting off very slowly, really. I work a lot with kind of visual aids, so kind of worksheets, if you like, in a folder that we'll work through, so they visually see kind of the situations that they're going through in front of them, which really helps a lot, because it helps to kind of understand what's going on. They can unpick, you know, the situation and simplify it to a certain degree. But sometimes it's not even appropriate to kind of use those, which is a big tool that I do use. But it's a lot about having those kind of softer, gentler conversations about, okay, well, you know, what's been going on for yourself? Why do you think you felt like that? Have you tried this? Have you thought about, you know, reframing that kind of thought in a slightly different way? And just kind of gaining that trust, really. But I noticed as well, especially years ago, snooker players snooker was a very kind of closed shop, where it used to be you had to trust, you know, people that were kind of recommended by other people and things like that. But it was a very hard kind of world to get involved with, really. Even though I started off sort of, you know, the first person I really worked with was Ronnie. But I never asked Ronnie to kind of say that we'd work together. It's kind of come out since over the years a little bit and things in different ways, but I never asked for that, because I didn't expect, you know, it's just not the way I work, really. Ronnie didn't do that, which would have given me a massive boost, but I was happy that he didn't as well. So even having that great big high for myself to start off with in that sport, thinking, oh, this is great, you know, this is going to work really well, and confident in what I do. I then, after that period of time, had to start right from scratch again, really, and kind of, it's taken me all those years, if you like, to get to where I am now, and still not many people know really what I do or who I am. So but I like that, because I know that what I have built personally, it's real and it's true and it works. As I said, the results sort of, you know, stand up for themselves, really. People are starting to talk about it a lot more, because I feel that players are being a bit more open, especially more recently, about their health and the mental health side of the game, and difficulties that they kind of face, which is really good. You know, that's for me, it doesn't matter who you talk to, you know, as long as you go and talk to somebody, if you're kind of struggling in any way, you know, as long as you kind of trust that person and you've got that confidence with them, doesn't matter who you talk to, you know, it's just good that you do. So the more those doors open, really, you know, for the better.
Yeah, and we can't really let you mention Ronnie, Matt, without asking you more about just how, you know, your insights into him, really. I mean, again, don't want to betray your relationship with him, your dad's relationship or anything, but, you know, it'd just be interesting. We all see what we see, don't we, and what we hear, and how things are portrayed. But you know, you've obviously got some bond there, and I know you've done some work, the drop-ins at the shop at Meadowhall, so you know, you've got a link there. What can you tell us about, you know, about working with him, the kind of guy he is? We all have our own ideas from what we see in the media.
No, for me, he just is a complete artist. You know, there was that period of time where I realized how he was a perfectionist, where everything had to be, you know, just right on the snooker table. You know, it doesn't surprise me at all, really, that, you know, he kind of, one of his best friends is obviously Damon Hirst. He's, you know, friendly with Ronnie Wood, who's another, you know, not just an artist in music, but Ronnie Wood paints, and, you know, he's a poet and all sorts of things. So doesn't surprise me, really, that Ronnie's involved with those sort of people, because that's the way that I kind of see him, really. Before anything else, he's just an artist, and you know, he kind of paints pictures on a snooker base, if you like, for me. So it was amazing, really, because there was times in the past where, for me, you kind of felt that he was 1 or 2 world championships ahead of where he, you know, actually was. You know, he might have, you know, perhaps should have had that record a little while ago, a few years back. I'm glad that he has achieved it, because I think, you know, with the difficulties that, you know, well publicized that he has had in his life and things, to to achieve still what he has done even now, just kind of amazes me really, and just shows how good kind of he is. I'll always regard him as a, you know, as a good friend and someone that I really think a lot of. I know, you know, everyone has their ups and downs, and personality wise, he has got kind of one of those personalities where, you know, especially when I think when he was younger, where he had to kind of be entertained and wanting to be excited and, you know, kind of winning tournaments and things like that. What do you do once you've had that great big high? What do you do kind of the next day, you know, when you still want to be in that place and want to experience that? So for me, for someone to start with along those lines, I learned so much from him really, because it confirmed kind of what I wanted to do, that the things that I kind of used and the techniques I used sort of worked. We was perhaps just starting to, I didn't have an awful lot of time sort of when we was working together properly, which was during the 2007 Masters with the kind of infamous Ding final and stuff. I knew during that week there was, I know that there was other things reported about, you know, that final and what was said to Ding and things like that, but you know, Ronnie was just kind of a wall that week really, and during that tournament. He'd kind of just built up so much during that time. It would have taken something very special to kind of beaten him during that period. And that you know, he was always going to go back to winning, but I think he'd had a bit of a dry patch for about 18 months, I believe. He hadn't won anything surprisingly for a little while before then. So it was nice to be part of getting that kind of ball moving again, but that would have always happened sort of anyway. But he's just such an interesting kind of character who, yes, can be kind of controversial, as we all kind of know. There's a lot of things I kind of see where I know that he actually means slightly different. He doesn't mean things in kind of sometimes a negative way that the press will pick up on things and turn things. He's been encouraged sometimes to be a little bit controversial because it brings a little bit of attention and stuff as well in the past and stuff. So yeah, but he's a good guy. He wears his heart on his sleeve. I've seen him do some amazing things to help other people that he doesn't speak about. No one really kind of knows. And that's the Ronnie that I know really. But overall, just a complete artist on the table.
It's really interesting to describe him as that, you know, and I mean, he's almost otherworldly, isn't he, in terms of just how amazing he is and how he just seems so natural. We did talk, and I'm interested in your thoughts on this, Matt, and we won't make this the Ronnie episode, but it's interesting to talk about him because he's such an amazing player, but fascinating character. And we've talked ourselves, Lee, haven't we, about, you know, say this Crucible campaign, and he almost publicly made it look as if, well, I can't wait to get it over with. It's a real drag. It's really tough, etc., etc. And almost that debate of how much he really wanted it and was practicing hard and behind the scenes was doing everything he could to give him the best chance, versus the public thing of, I just need to get through this and we'll see what happens. You know, he's obviously natural, but you get the feeling that away from the camera, he works really hard as well as his natural talent.
Yeah. I don't think I hope he doesn't mind me saying, but yeah, I've seen him. I've known really good guitarists over the years that will play until their fingers bleed, but, you know, in practice and things like that. You know, Ronnie has had times where he'll do the same. He'll practice until his fingers will bleed. So, you know, you talking again generally, you don't get to those standards without the hard work and the hours of hard work. And quite often, you know, when you get to a certain level, it's then the thinking and the mindset and that side of it and how you frame sort of situations that make a difference to you and what you can achieve and what sort of legacy that you leave behind you, really. So, you know, there's I think, again, sort of the little short period of time I had of actually working with him, I'd started introducing some of the tools and techniques that, you know, kind of I know that Steve Peters would then go on to kind of use later on. And although I didn't know that at the time, we've got very similar kind of backgrounds. So, and the techniques are very, very similar. And we talk about the same process really in the same cycles. so I'm really glad that the two people that I really feel that brought out the best for Ronnie was Ray Reardon and Steve Peters. The two of them had a huge impact on his career, and I know he knows that and feels that as well. So the relationship that he had with Ray was just unbelievable. But Ray's such a great guy as well. He was Ronnie. I know. I heard a little interview where Ray mentioned Ronnie as, it's like father and son. Well, kind of during that time, I saw kind of Ray as being my granddad, really. He was that kind of figure to kind of everybody. So, but again, kind of the tactician sort of side of Ray really kind of helped Ronnie. And I think Steve Peters has come along at the right time at that moment to kind of put the cherry on top of the cake, really, and kind of help with that mindset sort of area as well.
To me, Matt, it seems like Ronnie sort of started his career halfway through, if you like, and I suppose that coincides with getting with guys like you. Ronnie could have done so much in the early half of his career, but he sort of waited till he was halfway through before he really started, winning like consistently. He achieved so much anyway, and I think he had, I think he referred to it recently, didn't he, as perhaps I've lost 10 years of my career, which I don't think is too far wrong, really. There's that kind of a bit of a gap in between where still winning some things, but not kind of the tournaments where you perhaps expect him to or kind of want him to if you was sort of around him. I wasn't working with him at the time. I was sat there watching kind of his match against Peter Ebdon sort of at the World Championships, and I've never ever sat in a match kind of quite like that, really, because he was in control of that match. He was in front, and there was a bit of a curveball kind of there, which we was all kind of sat there. I was sort of watching the crowd more than Ronnie, because the crowd were kind of checking their watches and huffing and puffing and moving around and things. And I look back and I think, well, even at the time, really, Ronnie was in such a good place before that tournament with Ray there as well and things. There was a bit of a curveball thrown at him, and that was one of the years where you kind of think, oh, that could have or perhaps should have been different, if you're kind of looking at it from Ronnie's side. But and there's a couple of those. So I'd personally kind of like to see him kind of make an eighth and things. I'm more than sure that he's kind of capable of that. It's and he seems to kind of, the way that he was talking this year, in the interviews after this World Championships, it sounded like that's there, the thought's there and the little sparks there. So, and for me, you're only in that position once where you can kind of, write those history books and, and sort of leave the legacy that you want to behind. And there's still opportunity for that. But again, I think that just shows what an amazing player he kind of is, because might not have achieved everything that he could have done or should have done, but look at still what he's achieving. So, sort of, I know so many players that would like half of what he's done so far. So, and with kind of the ongoing backstory as well about his kind of life and things like that, I think he's done amazingly well. I remember that match you're talking about with Peter Ebdon. That must have been really interesting for you. And famously, I think Peter made a 12 break in the same amount of time for Ronnie to make his maximum. But I thought that was incredible from Peter, to be fair, because Peter was never going to beat Ronnie, at his own game. So I thought, for Peter to come through that game, I thought it was amazing. It must have been really interesting for you to sit and watch that.
Yeah, it was. Like it was strange, because I was working in other sports doing what I do sort of now. I'd known Ronnie for probably about a year and a half, I guess, something like that beforehand. My family had kind of known him sort of longer and stuff. I would have loved to have kind of had more input at that time, because the conversations that you feel that you would have had and how you would have perhaps kind of shaped that a little bit differently and dealt with that curveball kind of being thrown at you. Everyone that I kind of work with, we always talk, you know, kind of a player might talk to me about different situations that might come up in a match. So yes, we'll discuss them. We'll put plans in place, but I pretty much always end up with, well, you know, but keep yourself, you know, not blinkered, open-minded, ready for anything. We've got all these different plans in place to deal with all these different situations. So even where a player kind of might expect a match to kind of follow a certain path, really sort of part of my job is to make sure that they're aware of all the different paths that could kind of take place as well, and all the other things that could kind of happen. So in some ways you're kind of preparing a little bit for the unknown, but if an unknown pops up all of a sudden, you know, you have got a plan there that you can fall back on to use and to put back in, you know, in place to kind of get you through it. So yeah, whereas as I think really Peter was, you know, I think you're dead right. I've felt that for years, and people have disagreed with that as well, that you know, for me that was the only way that really Peter could have beaten him sort of that day, and he pulled out the one thing that, you know, kind of would do it for him. So it was, I think, even the interesting part for me really is how Peter reacted afterwards, because he was really upset in the interview that he had with the BBC, I think it was at the time, and things like that, where that kind of showed me that there wasn't, the focus was all on that match. There wasn't kind of a plan for afterwards, you know. And again, that's a lot about what we talk about, is you kind of set your goals, focus on the match that you've got in front of you, but then it doesn't end there. You have a pathway in mind as well for what happens next and how you go on from there. Because I think wasn't it? It was the year that sort of Sean Murphy went on to win it. I think Peter Ebdon sort of lost his next match after Ronnie, I believe. So
I think so. Yeah.
And that's a big part of it. So if Peter perhaps had that kind of plan to then kind of go on afterwards already in mind, so he had that pathway in front, perhaps that, you know, that next match, the following match, might have had a different result to it as well. Because I'm sure part of his mind was probably still on a bit of perception of how his peers kind of viewed him after that, how the audience viewed him after that, how Ronnie did. Not that, I don't think many things get to kind of Peter, but he obviously showed his emotion sort of during that time afterwards as well. So
I think he was questioned quite a bit, you know, in that interview as well, about the slow play and stuff. And I think obviously your adrenaline stops pumping once the match is done, and that obviously gives way to a lot of emotions coming out as well. So
big release, really, wasn't it?
No,
it's very true. It's that's how I felt at the time, sort of there. And you know, what you've kind of said really is exactly sort of what I was thinking at the time. But it was very interesting for myself to kind of see how, you know, kind of that interaction went on. It was interesting to be sat next to Ray, who was kind of muttering and huffing and puffing and stuff. And because for me, I know Ronnie understands how much of an influence Ray had with him and stuff and things. But what fascinated me was that I used to watch players kind of walk into the venue and walk towards the table, and you'd physically watch them look across at Ronnie and take a gulp and a bit of a sigh because they were playing Ronnie. But then they'd look up as well and see Ray in the balcony or Ray in the audience, and you'd see them take another big gulp and a huff and a puff, because it was like playing the two of them, I think. You know, it was a formidable force during that time. It really was.
We've had another person doing similar kind of work, really, and Noel Flannery, and he was talking a bit about in that episode about the relationship you kind of strike up. So there's obviously a professional relationship. You're providing a service, and somebody's paying to do that. But it did sound from him, and you've touched on it a bit about being called at different times, that there's an element of, you know, there's somebody in your corner. You might get called at different times. You might be in the audience watching and kind of give the odd nod here and there, and then a chat mid-session and things like this. So does it become, you know, almost on a humanistic or, you know, different level, really, where you're kind of working with that person outside of the, you know, there's the moral support, the unconditional support for that person. Does that spill over beyond the normal boundaries of that professional relationship? Because of my background with hospitals, clinics,
working in those sort of areas, I'm always really mindful of that and mindful of your barriers and things. So yeah, we was talking a little bit beforehand about having, you know, kind of what are my working hours. Well, I am really flexible. You kind of have to be, you know, because people, especially on the amateur tour, because people are working during the day and then they want to speak to you during the evening, so your evenings can be quite full at times. And then working with, I think there's 4 on the main tour at the moment, so you've kind of got them during the day, sort of a lot of time, then you've got a lot of amateurs and things in the evenings. Q School on at the moment, so I've got, you know, 7 players in Q School at the minute, which is my highest number. Last year was 6, I've gone to 7 this year. So yeah, so, but I always, yeah, I've got those boundaries from, very much conscious of that from kind of my background and where that comes from. I still am, but it's the way you kind of work, and the person that I sort of am, I'm not happy until they have achieved their goals. So so you can kind of soak up a lot of information, a lot of feeling during that time. You know, if a player's really struggling, you can kind of take some of that on yourself, because you want them to feel better. You don't want them to, you know, feel down. You don't want them to kind of be struggling after a loss and things. Not that we talk about losses, but I might talk about that in a minute as well. But yeah, so it's, I can't say that people haven't become friends, and it's a real privilege to work with a group of people that I do, because I kind of feel, especially within snooker, even though I work in other sports, there's I work with such a good group of people. They're all different. They've all got different characters, different personalities. But they've all got very similar goals, even though they want to kind of achieve those in slightly different ways. So there is the professional side that we kind of keep professional, but I get my excitement and my enjoyment out of seeing them do well as well. So I always offer, with anybody that gets in contact, I always offer just a telephone conversation. You call it an assessment, but that sounds a little bit harsh really to some people. It's just a kind of a basic chat where I can kind of get to know them, they get to know me a little bit. I make sure that what they're looking for is what I actually do. So I'm completely honest. So if they mention something that isn't something that I cover, I'll try and refer them on to someone else, or I might kind of divert them back to their coach or another coach and things. You know, that's obviously a really important thing to do. But they often feel that conversation is about them making their mind up about if they want to work with me. But it goes the other way as well, because during that conversation, I get an idea of what their goals are, what their commitment is, how much determination they've got. Sometimes you're just looking for a tiny little spark, which, because some people, you know, because of their experiences, can be very low and they can be very negative, and, you know, even towards the sport that they're playing within. But then all of a sudden they'll mention a tiny little comment where you kind of think, oh, actually, you know, there is something there that you can kind of help grow and develop, and that's the little spark that you kind of look for. So once I've decided to work with someone, I'm then kind of taking on a commitment, really, because I'm not happy until they've won, and I'm not happy until they've achieved all their goals. And quite often they'll set their own goals and mine will be a little bit higher than theirs, because we kind of naturally might put ourselves down a little bit and things like that in a way. But quite often they'll set their goals, they'll tell me what they are, but in the back of my mind I'm thinking, okay, you think you can achieve this, but I think you can achieve that. So but yeah, there's a lot of friendships there, and I'm privileged to work with a group of people that I do, because you know, everyone, they're just all great characters, great people to talk to and work with. We'll have little conversations where they'll just phone me up out the blue, and it'll be, oh, I was just, don't want anything, I was just thinking, you know, of you actually, and how's the family and things like that. But that's, yeah, it's great, it's nice. And but then that helps in the long run as well, because they obviously trust you enough to kind of, they trust your opinion and they trust your knowledge and your experience to kind of help them in difficult times, which, you know, it's an honor to be able to be thought of in that way.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, the way you talk there. You did mention there, you were going to touch upon it a little bit about not talking about losses. Now, I don't know if this is almost a positive psychology angle or something, but what's that then? Is that more about focusing on the future and what you can do and not dwelling? Where were you started to lead us there?
It is dead simple, really. It's I just, for a very long time, I just don't see, you know, we don't win or lose, we win or learn, and that's you know, it's just how, you know, I realized that myself in a long time ago, in my own background and my own experiences. We all make mistakes, and we learn from those. It's always, you know, the thing really of looking to what that lesson is. You know, you can kind of, you know, come out of the wrong end of a really important match for yourself and think, well, you know, all those hours of practice, you know, all the hours of playing, I've qualified to kind of get to this point, and why has this suddenly been taken away from me? And and that feeling is horrible. It's I think one of the worst feelings that you can kind of have. It's the way really that it works is it is a bereavement. You've lost something. You know, when we talk about grief, you know, it works in exactly the same way. So if you've got an importance about a person or an event, something that you're taking part in, and you feel that you've lost it, you go through those stages, or you can go through those stages of grief as though someone has died, you know, which can be a mixture of kind of, you know, laughing at the wrong times, or your humor not matching to the situation. It can be that you feel angry, frustrated, sad, you know, down, miserable. Go, you know, kind of through all those sort of different stages that we would, you know, find as if we'd lost someone that was close to us. So but there overall there is a lesson always to kind of be learned. There's little bits there of, you know, what could you have done better, what would you have done differently? You know, what can we take from that to help us, you know, next time you're in that situation? I know you was talking about sort of Ashley, sort of the world championships and things like that. That, you know, obviously the goal is, with, you know, you kind of had that experience, you've exposed yourself to that situation. One of the big goals that every player kind of strives to achieve, but we want that again. That we want that to be a regular thing. You know, with everyone that I work with. It's, you know, consistency in any sport's important. Consistency in life's important, and especially within snooker, you know, it's those fine margins make a difference. But if you can kind of approach every match, every tournament, every other opponent in the same way, that's where your consistency starts coming from, and then you kind of build on top of that with your ability, and you know, getting yourself into that same situation over and over again, where you get nearer and nearer to that finish line, really. So but yeah, it is very basic. It's basic as in, you know, we don't lose, we just learn. You know, what can we learn from that? If there isn't anything to learn, you know, imagine that it's a piece of paper, really. Screw it up, throw it away. It hasn't got any value to us. It's only going to take energy away from us if we concentrate on it for too long. So let's move on, you know, prepare for the next one, and get ready for the next.
Yeah, I've written that down actually. We don't win or lose, we win or learn. Yeah, I'm going to use that.
Checks in the post.
Yeah, I'll send the invoice over.
I'll spread the word I'll do it for free. I'll tell everyone all that. That's really fascinating. And how did it go? You had the session at Meadowhall, and people kind of dropping in. Did you get any interest there? Was that interesting setup to have?
Do you know, the sort of person again that I am, and it might come across as a bit cheesy, or I can't be any different really. I always, obviously there was that connection with Ronnie. The shop was something that I visited myself last year when it was a bit of a smaller version. It was the first year that they were there, and that was really interesting to sort of walk around. So from my side, it was a bit of, how can I kind of help? What can I kind of do to, you know, try and encourage people perhaps to kind of come and visit and experience that as well. So again, it was something else, a privilege to kind of be involved with. It was really impressive this year. Did either of you manage to get across at all, or no?
No.
it's a bit of a mixture of this year. It was a bit of a mixture of a snooker club one side, because you was able to play snooker and play pool, which was really good. That was great. It was good to see sort of, you know, dads and sons kind of, you know, playing both sports sort of in there. You know, kind of really how we all probably kind of get into the sport in the first place, really, is sort of that family kind of, you know, encouragement and things. So that was really good. You had then like a section which was like a museum, because they've got kind of old tables, old equipment, you know, memorabilia from Ronnie's career himself and from other players as well. And then you've obviously got the shop element. So I didn't really kind of go along with any expectations. I didn't really know who I was going to talk to. But it was amazing the amount of people from all across the country, and some people from different countries as well, sort of visiting there, making kind of the trip there just to visit that shop. And all the different backgrounds that those people came from as well. You know, I had people that worked with the homeless that I spoke to, which is a bit of to do with my background. So that was really interesting just to talk to them about that. Had people with disabilities as well that kind of were coming in and sort of taking part and having a look around the shop. You had women, children, adults, you know, everybody really. So for me, it was just good to be in that environment, and to kind of, it made a nice change for myself just to be able to have conversations with people that really enjoy and love the sport. Everyone that kind of come in, when you sort of said, oh, do you play? It was kind of the same answer of no, not really, because they're in Ronnie's shop. But yeah, just to have normal conversations really with people that enjoy the sport so much. And for me, you get a little bit of electric sort of back from those people, because you understand and you hear, you know, kind of what difference players make to them, of seeing them play, the enjoyment that they get, especially with the World Championships on, kind of the enjoyment and excitement they get from walking into the shop for the first time and seeing that and what's in there. And yeah, just communicating really with people from all different backgrounds. And I think most of the people that we spoke to, because I still do a lot around mental health and working with everyday issues with other clients as well, away from snooker and sport. And to be honest, we ended up talking about a lot of personal kind of family problems that people had and that sort of thing. So a lot of the conversations weren't actually about snooker, but it was a great place to have those conversations. So yeah, it was really good. I was only originally supposed to be there for one day, but kind of done two in the end. So yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Sounds fascinating. I mean, to be fair, Lee, I mean, we're now with this podcast, we're coming up for a year. And I think Lee would agree that for us, it's that people interaction, it's talking about something common, but actually the most satisfying bit for me isn't really talking about what you want. It's that bit around who are you and what motivates you and what do you care about. And I find myself, again, I don't know about you, Lee, but I find myself after the episodes really caring about the future of that player and really hoping they do well, whoever they are. We've got Liam Davies going through Crucible at the moment, who you know, we've met a few times. He's been on different things. Such a lovely fella. In fact, his YouTube one is the most watched one that we've done, despite having people like Neil Robertson on. So you know, you just, I don't know, I always find I just come away rooting for them, and every single person we've had on to a person has just been a lovely, down-to-earth, really relatable person, and really special as a community, I think, Lee. Would you agree, Lee?
Yeah, absolutely. As you say, Michael, it's great to get an insight, and you know, not just the playing side of things for the players, obviously, that we're speaking to, but just sort of how they're feeling, and I suppose that's what you're doing, Matt. You're dealing with those feelings and issues that the players have got, and I just think the mental side of the game's fascinating. And obviously you do too, but it's great to get an insight into what the players think when they're playing. Yeah,
no, definitely. And the amount of times as well where players will kind of go, well, this might sound a bit strange to you, or I bet no one said this to you before. And it just shows really that how kind of lonely in a lot of ways the sport can be, and individually what those players kind of carry around with themselves and the thoughts that they carry. Even working with people on sort of the main tour that have, you know, quite high up the rankings and experienced, and you know, you'll still have the same conversations with them. Is, oh, I bet no one's told you this before, and you think, oh, okay, and I've kind of got a bit used to it, where I suppose my first thought is, well, I bet I kind of have, sort of thing, but you've still got that thing in your mind, as in, well, this could be interesting, like what are they going to say? And it usually is a thought that you've heard over and over again, that every player kind of has mentioned or thinks. And it can be someone who's literally just starting out, you know, perhaps their parents have got involved and sort of said, oh, you know, can I have a little bit of a chat with my lad because he seems a bit stuck, or something like that. And or someone in the top 16, the kind of problems that they might come up with are quite often very similar, if not the same. So, which I suppose it does still surprise me, really, especially with the experienced players who have, you know, you've sat and watched yourselves on telly and things like that, and think, well, you know, they must feel a little bit different. But yeah, they'll kind of carry the same worries around with them, and that's, for someone that's just getting onto the main tour as well, that's something that they don't really understand, because they'll look above them and see all these great names sort of above them and feel that they're against it straight away, because those players don't have worries. They don't, you know, they don't have nerves. They don't, you know, don't panic. They don't sort of pace up and down their hotel rooms, you know, night before, worrying about who they're going to play. But you know, I can assure anyone, you know, on any stage, you know, people are worrying about other people. So, you know, and playing, and that little voice is there for all of us, really, that pops up and kind of says, well, you know, I know you've done this over and over again, but today's going to be a little bit different. You might trip over, or you might embarrass yourself, or, you know, what happens if you can't play today, you know, and things like that. So doesn't really matter who you are. It's very much about managing that voice that can kind of pop up at any point, any stage. And like I was saying kind of early on, really, there's so many players that still aren't working on this side of the game. So there's quite a few that when they first get in contact, they'll say, oh, you know, I've read Steve Peters' book, you know, that was interesting. Or I've watched some clips on YouTube of someone else talking about confidence. But they still haven't really actually gone and worked properly on this side. And then when they do, I know we was talking about people that are a little bit skeptical, you know, and when even those people, really, after a very short time, it's, oh, hang on a minute, like, it might even start with one comment from someone was, well, hang on a minute, I don't know what's happening. I don't know how this is working, but every time I go and play in a tournament and you're there, I end up winning. And I know it's not me being there. It's not, you know, it's the conversations that we've had on the phone, or, you know, sessions that we've had beforehand that are making a difference. They might still be quite skeptical, because that's quite a hard thing to kind of let go of, as in, well, actually, I've changed my opinion, this actually works. So, but then comes a time where they kind of go, actually, you know, I understand this now. I understand about managing that little voice in my head. It's not fighting with it. It's not battling with it. It's just communicating with it better, managing it better, you know, so that I can actually play to the top of my ability. And as we all know, how many conversations we have where players of all standards say, you know, I'm playing so well in practice, it's just not coming out in the matches. And quite often that's a little bit of a difference, really, is just that change in perception, the value that we put on those different situations, and that little voice kind of going from being okay and happy in practice because the environment's different, to then popping up and going, well, actually, are you ready for this match, you know, tomorrow? You know, you're playing Neil Robertson, you know, he's a good player, isn't he? And it takes all the focus away from you and what you're doing, and puts it, you know, your worry onto someone else. So.
And you touched on it there by saying, you know, you could go on the internet and have a look at this or that on the psychological side of the game, but what you do is very much tailored to the individual. So what they're watching might not necessarily be what they're needing. Yeah,
that is true. And like Steve Peters' book as well, it's a brilliant book. His way that he's kind of described things, sort of from my background, there's lots of words that will kind of pop up, like chimp and things like that, that we've used in those environments for years. But he was really good at kind of using that to explain that voice that sort of pops up. We sometimes in the past called it, like your child, and we'll named it after other animals and things like that. But yeah, the book's brilliant. But I think as well, what I kind of done is I recognized from the background that I had was that a player doesn't need or doesn't want really to kind of go into a match with a long list of 20 things to kind of remember. They've got enough to remember anyway and enough to concentrate on. So what I kind of done at the time in the early days was take all the information and knowledge and the experience that I had and what I'd been trained and qualified in, and kind of diluted a lot of it really to things that you needed, broke it down into understandable kind of concepts and very easy to use tools, which then kind of become just a natural way of being, if you like. So which is the grander scheme of things, the bigger part of the techniques is to do that as well. You're growing what that person's already got within them, even though they might not recognize it or know it. But what I kind of done was trimmed all that down, broke it down into simple tools to kind of work with people, so that they're not walking in with a list of 20 things of like, oh, I need to hold my chin up, I need to do this, or, if this happens, Matt wants me to do this and do that and everything else. So it's very basic, but it's very basic for a reason. And the good thing is, if someone's interested, you can sit there and you can explain the bigger part of it and the bigger picture. But what do you need to know as a snooker player? You need really to be focused on your job at hand, getting the work sort of done that you're there for, in the easiest way that you can kind of make it for yourself, with those tools that you then got in place to kind of rely on, where you kind of go, okay, I recognize this situation. Really, that thought that I'm having, that voice that I'm having isn't very helpful. I know how to change that so I can approach this situation in a different frame of mind. So a lot of time it is about reframing sort of what's in front of you, so you're looking at it in a different view.
Quick question, Matt, before we go, because I think we'll round up in a minute, but have you ever had the situation yet where you've been working with a group of players and then they've been drawn against each other?
All the time, to be honest. Quite often. Which is it is kind of good. I know, obviously, kind of last World Championships, sort of there was the big thing about, sort of obviously Murphy playing Selby and things like that. I think from my point of view, I haven't had it in the World Championships before, but I have had it in a lot of big finals in sort of other big major tournaments before, and Q schools, things like that and stuff, where it's the kind of professional side. So you're talking to those people then kind of generally, it's, remember what we've spoken about, use the tools that you've got in place, a little bit of, kind of really wishing both luck, because it's such a hard place to be, because you want both of them to win and you want both of them to achieve their goals. But at the same time, from my side, that each individual is on their individual path, so that it's all part of a process for that individual. So they may not win that match against someone else that you're working with, but for me, I'm taking it then back to their individual path, where I'm kind of going, okay, you didn't win that one, it was someone else's turn today. We know where you are in your plan and on your path. This is just part of it, really, part of that journey. And, let's, again, take what we can, lesson wise from that event, and use that to help us kind of move forward and on to the next one. So that it's where you use your own tools, to be honest, because it's always the emotional side of our brain that reacts first. So, and we're no different. It happens that way for all of us. So when I see a draw, straight away I think, oh no, it's like, why couldn't they have met here? But then the logical and the rational side kick in, and they can't, and then you start working it out, and you think, well, no, actually, they're both on different paths, individuals, It's great experience for both of them. You know, good luck to both. May the best man win, if you like, or person sort of win. But it's more about their individual paths, really, and that's just a small part of their journey. Yeah, so it's an interesting one. It does come up quite a lot, especially on the amateurs as well. I've kind of noticed, and there's but I think from like yourselves, you know, the community or the talks and the discussions that you've had with the players, where you've had that feeling afterwards of, well, actually, I want that player now to do well, and because he seems a nice kind of guy and things. You know, it can't be too dissimilar to what you're kind of experiencing yourselves as well, I think.
But at the end of the day, if they win, then great. But if they lose, they don't lose, they learn. So it's all right, isn't it? No,
that's part of it, and that's why I'm a great believer of that, and that is part of that individual's journey. And you know, it's okay. Well, you know, that's happened. It's kind of forget really who that person was. What did we learn from it, and what are we going to use to kind of make you stronger and, you know, build for the next tournament. Sometimes, as you know, some of the events, you know, they can kind of finish playing one day and be playing again, you know, if not the next day, within a couple of days, sort of these days. So Crucible was interesting over the last couple of years because they squeezed all those events closer together. So you had to react and reset very quickly with those, but that's what it's about really, is kind of managing those situations. I'm probably getting really excited and thinking, you know, I'm really enjoying this because it's a challenge, whereas the player might be thinking, oh, you know, it's another event, or that, you know, I've kind of got to learn from, but, you know, get ready for the next one. So yeah, that's what fascinates me really, is those ups and downs, but my job is to smooth them out, if you like, to kind of bring that consistency and the stability.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating chat, Matt, to be honest, and we really could kind of take a lot more time. But I think what we'll do is we'll probably say bye. But some of the players or people in the sport may watch this or listen to this and think, oh, I actually would like to talk to Matt. So what is normally the easiest or the best way for people to contact you if they're interested?
It is obviously really easy these days. So on Facebook, that seems such a popular thing sort of at the moment. So I'm on there as Matt Andrews Mentoring on Facebook. I think there's a lot of players that I'm either connected to on there or friends with, so that's quite easy to find. I'm on Twitter as well, under the same kind of heading. But yeah, I'm open to sort of messages, text messages. My phone number's out there as well. Got a website, mattandrewsmentoring.org, if I've got that right, that's easy to find as well, sort of on there if people want to kind of find out more on there. But I'm open obviously to messages, phone calls, whatever's easiest for anybody out there really.
Great, really enjoyed it, Matt, and I know Lee will have done as well.
Yeah, Matt, it's always fascinating talking about the mental side of the game, and thanks so much for your time and all the best going forward. Yeah, no, just thanks very much for having us on and giving us the opportunity to talk to you both. I think that's what I enjoy. I just enjoy meeting people and talking to people, especially within the sport, and you know, kind of talking to other people that have got the enthusiasm there as well. So.